Title: She gave her jacket to a shivering man at bus stop. Unaware he is a millionaire, he changed her. Part 1. The Night Wind and a Kind Stranger. Word count: ~11:20. The wind whipped down the narrow Chicago street like it had a score to settle. Lampposts trembled. Paper cups spun like dying ballerinas. Somewhere in the distance, a siren howled through the night, shrill and haunting. It was nearly midnight, and Nurse Annalie's shoes made soft squishing sounds against the pavement as she walked home after another grueling shift. Her breath came out in clouds, white against the black canvas of the winter sky. Her fingers, peeking out from torn gloves, were numb. Her hospital-issued jacket had a broken zipper, and the inner lining was barely thicker than a blanket of paper. But she didn't complain. She never did. Not when patients screamed abuse, not when the hospital cut their cafeteria hours, not even when she had to walk 6 blocks because her car had died again. Life, she had learned, was a storm you walk through, head down, heart steady. At the corner of West Erie and North Noble, she noticed him. A man, slouched on the bench of a bus stop, wrapped in what looked like a thin grey bedsheet. No hat, no gloves, just jeans, a hoodie, and hollow eyes staring blankly at the snow-dusted sidewalk. His beard was overgrown, his face bruised by the cold. Annalie's step slowed. God, she whispered under her breath. She walked past him at first, trying not to meet his eyes. It wasn't that she didn't care, she cared too much, sometimes to her own detriment. But she'd been warned enough times, don't get involved. Don't stop at night. Not in this city. Not with strangers. But something tugged at her, something stronger than logic. It was that same stubborn empathy that had made her join the nursing program in the first place. That same instinct that told her to sit with dying patients long after visiting hours ended. She turned back. Hey, she said gently, stepping closer. So? The man barely moved. His lips were bluish, his body trembling. But his eyes lifted, just slightly, just enough to meet hers. You're gonna freeze out here, she said. You waiting for the bus? He blinked once. A slow, uncertain nod. She looked up at the digital schedule on the bus stop sign. The next bus was in 42 minutes. Annalie sighed. She could barely feel her own legs anymore, but he looked half dead. She shrugged off her hospital jacket and placed it over his shoulders. The man flinched slightly, like he hadn't been touched in years. It's not much, she said, but it's warmer than that sheet. He looked at her then. Really looked. His eyes were a deep grey, almost colourless, but there was something alive in them now, something startled. Like someone who had forgotten what kindness felt like. You'll get cold, he murmured. She smiled faintly. I'm already cold. He took the jacket slowly, like it might disappear if he moved too fast. Thank you. You don't have gloves, do you? She asked. Here. She pulled off hers, torn as they were, and slipped them into his hands. Annalie, he said, suddenly. That's your name. She blinked. How? He pointed weakly at her name badge, still clipped to her scrubs. Oh, right, she laughed softly. Yeah, Nurse Annalie. He gave a small, chapped lip smile. You save my night, Nurse Annalie. She hesitated. You have somewhere to go. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked away, eyes resting on a flickering streetlight. She got the message. Well, she said, standing up again, rubbing her own arms. Bus will be here soon. Don't miss it, okay? Why'd you help me? He asked suddenly. Most people don't even look at me. She thought for a second, then shrugged. Because I'd want someone to stop for me if I was freezing to death. She turned and walked away, the snow crunching under her steps. She didn't look back. She didn't know his name. She didn't even expect to see him again. But something inside her felt different. Like she'd just dropped a pebble in a still pond, and the ripples hadn't even started yet. Part 2. The Goodbye Card. Word count, ~14:30. 3 days passed. Annalie hadn't seen him again. She kept her eyes peeled every time she passed that bus stop, scanning the benches and side alleys on her walk home. But he was gone, vanished like a ghost warmed into vapor. Part of her was relieved. Maybe he'd found shelter, or someone who could help more than a nurse with torn gloves and a broken jacket. But part of her missed him, which didn't make sense. She didn't even know his name. Her nights returned to their usual rhythm, tending to the drunk, the wounded, the forgotten. The hospital was always full, especially in the ER. One evening, she'd just stitched up a man who'd walked into a bar fight with more ego than common sense, when a clerk from reception called her name. Annalie, he shouted across the hall. You got a package? A what? A little box, he said, holding it up. Says your name. Handwritten. Annalie frowned. She wasn't expecting anything. No one in her family ever sent her mail. Too broke, too busy. Her friends were mostly co-workers, and she hadn't ordered anything online in weeks. She took the small brown envelope cautiously. It was plain, the size of a paperback book, with her name in neat block letters. No return address. Inside, there was a card, simple, white, folded. No design. No glitter. Just a few lines in the same clean handwriting. 3 nights ago, you saved my life. I didn't even ask for help, but you gave it anyway. That moment changed everything. Thank you, Jay. Tucked inside was a photograph, black and white, slightly faded at the edges. It showed a man, younger, smiling awkwardly at the camera while holding a guitar. The background was a dingy apartment wall covered in band posters. The man was him. Same jawline. Same deep, hollow eyes. Only now, he was filled with warmth, caught in a time before the cold swallowed him. Annalie stared at it for a long time. There was no phone number, no clue where it had come from. Just a single initial. J. She asked the front desk if they'd seen who dropped it off. But all she got was a shrug. No cameras on that side of the lobby. Could have been anyone. That night, she lay in bed with a card next to her. Something about it unnerved her. Not in a bad way, but like a puzzle with no border pieces. Who was he? Where had he come from? Why that night? And why her? She didn't know it yet, but the card was only the beginning. The next morning, a snowstorm blanketed the city. Everything was quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes after the world has been smothered in white. Annalie had the day off, and for once, she used it. She bundled up in 2 layers, slipped the card into her pocket, and walked back to the same bus stop. The bench was wet, the metal frozen. No one in sight. But underneath the bench, barely visible through the slush, was something dark and cloth-like. She crouched and pulled it free. A hoodie. Grey. Worn out, with a hole near the pocket. She recognized it instantly. It was his. Tucked inside was another note. Folded tightly and pressed against a flattened pack of cigarettes. I was a musician once. Played bars, rooftops, anywhere with a plug and a crowd. But I lost everything. My brother, my girl, then my home. The street became my only audience. Then you came. You looked at me like I still mattered. Like I wasn't just another ghost on a bench. I didn't know people like you still existed. So I decided to try again. If you ever hear music on the Green Line platform at midnight, that's me. I'll be playing for you. Annalie stood frozen in the snow, heart pounding like it had heard a secret and wasn't ready to let go. She looked down at the hoodie in her hand, then at the empty bench, then back at the note. Green Line. Midnight. It was crazy, probably dangerous. And yet, she knew she'd go. At 11:57 that night, she stood on the Green Line platform, wrapped in an old scarf and holding the card like a talisman. The station was mostly empty, just a few commuters clinging to coffee cups, earbuds in, shoulders hunched. The air smelled of concrete and old oil. Then, at exactly midnight, a sound rose above the rumble of the train tracks. Music. Soft at first. A slow acoustic rhythm, drifting from the far end of the platform. It wasn't the clean, polished sound of a performer. It was raw, lived in. Like a voice telling a story with 6 strings. Annalie turned, and there he was. Jay. Sitting on a milk crate, guitar in his lap. Same deep eyes. But something had shifted. He looked cleaner now. A trim beard. A fresh beanie. Still rough around the edges, but standing straighter, strumming like he had a reason. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. A real smile this time. No frost, no fear. You came, he said. I got your notes, she replied. Couldn't stay away. They stood in silence for a moment, the music filling the space between them. Then he gestured to the crate next to him. Want to sit? She did. They talked. Not much, just little things. His name was Jameson, but everyone used to call him Jem. He used to play backup guitar for a band called the Knotted Strings, before their van crashed outside of Detroit. He broke his collarbone. The drummer died. The label cut them loose, and Jem spiraled. Booze, depression, homelessness. The story she'd heard before, in different versions, from different patients. But hearing it here, from someone she'd helped without even knowing, made it feel personal. You were the first person who looked at me like I wasn't broken, he said. That night. I wasn't planning to wait for the bus. I was just sitting there, trying to get enough courage to stop breathing. Annalie's chest tightened. But then, he continued, you came along, and handed me your jacket like I was worth something. She said nothing, just reached over and touched his gloved hand. I didn't save your life, she whispered. You reminded me I had one, he replied. They sat for an hour. 2. Eventually, the cold forced them home. Him to a shelter that a social worker had helped him find, her to her small apartment with a flickering bathroom light. But something had shifted, and the card, the simple, white card, remained on her fridge, a quiet reminder of what one act of compassion could become. She didn't know it yet, but Jameson's goodbye card wasn't a farewell. It was the start of something neither of them could have expected. Part 3. Notes in the Snow. Word count, ~1720. It started with coffee. Not the first night. No, that night had ended with cold fingers and shared silence. But the second, when Annalie returned to the Green Line platform with 2 paper cups from a 24-hour diner and a question stuck in her throat. Black or sugar? She'd asked. Jem smiled. Always black. Like my luck. He took it with a nod, their fingers brushing again. That small contact had begun to mean more than she'd expected. A whisper between strangers that something new was blooming beneath the frost. They began meeting almost every night. Sometimes for music, sometimes just to sit, legs swinging over the edge of the station as trains roared past. Annalie learned things she never thought to ask anyone. How Jem used to sneak into empty churches just to play his guitar in the perfect acoustics. How he once slept in a piano crate backstage after a gig fell apart. How he wrote songs not for money, but to keep memories from escaping. You can't lose a memory if it has a melody, he said once. It becomes part of you. He played her a new tune every few nights. Some with lyrics, most without. One he said was called Annalie's Coat. She laughed. You wrote a song about my raggedy old jacket. It saved my skin. Now it saves my chords. He was changing. It wasn't dramatic, no miraculous rebirth, but slow and real. He cut his hair, started volunteering at a community music center that gave lessons to kids who couldn't afford them. Picked up gigs at hole-in-the-wall coffee houses that paid in tips and sandwiches. One night, Annalie watched from the back of a crowd as he played to a group of college students. And for the first time, she saw the man he must have been before the world tour at his edges. Confident. Whole. Warm. And yet, something lingered in his eyes. Like a shadow that refused to loosen its grip. One night, as February leaned into March and the snow began to rot into brown slush, Jem handed her a folded sheet of paper. What's this? A song, he said. But not one I'm going to play. She unfolded it. The title read, Train to Nowhere. It was a raw, broken piece. Verses that trembled with guilt and grief. The words spoke of a brother named Caleb, of a promise broken, of a fire that stole more than a home. One stanza read, I said I'd come back, before the snow fell. But snow never waits, and I never did. Annalie looked up, eyes stinging. Your brother? Jem nodded, jaw tight. Caleb was 15. I left when I was 20. Said I'd send money, come back for him when I made it. Then the band started moving. I kept telling myself, next month. Next show. Next paycheck. He looked away. But the house burned down before I ever sent the bus fare. Silence swallowed them both. I didn't even go to the funeral, Jem whispered. Didn't feel like I deserved to. Annalie slid closer, resting her head gently on his shoulder. He stiffened at first, then let out a shaky breath and leaned in. You're here now, she said softly. That has to count for something. The next week, Jem disappeared. No calls. No music at the station. No notes. The shelter he'd been staying at said he hadn't checked in. The music center hadn't seen him since Monday. Annalie panicked. She checked every corner of the Green Line platform. Walked the block around the shelter 3 times. Visited the diner, the pawn shop he once sold his watch to, even the corner where she first found him, hoping to see a shadow in the frost. Nothing. On the 4th night, she found an envelope taped to her apartment door. It was soaking wet but sealed with clear tape. Inside was a note. I'm not running. Just need to make something right. I'll be back. Don't forget me. J. It wasn't signed Jem. Just that single letter again. A full circle to their first exchange. Annalie clutched the note to her chest and sat on her bed, overwhelmed by a storm of fear and hope. What did he mean by make something right? Where had he gone? She didn't sleep that night. Or the next. On the 3rd morning, she called in sick, something she never did, and rode the Green Line from end to end. She watched the city smear by in slashes of grey and white. Street preachers. Steam grates. Men with dreams stitched into coats. And women like her, who gave away jackets because their hearts were heavier than their wardrobes. She thought about Jem, the broken musician who looked at her like she was made of light, who called her the moment that changed everything. And now he was gone. 5 days after his note appeared, Annalie returned home from a double shift, body aching and soul heavier than her coat. The sun had dipped below the skyline, and snow flurries floated in lazy circles. As she climbed the stairs to her building, she saw something pinned to the front door, a single page, printed on cheap paper, flapping in the wind. It was a flyer. Open MIC night. One night only, Hollow Tree Coffee. Beneath it, scribbled in permanent marker, last song, midnight, come if you still believe. J. She checked the date. Tonight. The Hollow Tree Coffee House was a tiny place wedged between a laundromat and a psychic reader's storefront. By the time Annalie arrived, the place was packed. Students, artists, people with scarves and notebooks and laughter in their mouths. The lights were dim, strung with fake vines, and the air buzzed with caffeine and anticipation. She pushed through the crowd, heart pounding, scanning for a familiar face. And then, there he was, on stage, guitar in hand. He looked different. He wore a white shirt, clean, crisp, hair tied back, no beanie. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the MIC. This song, he said, voice cracking, is for someone who handed me a second chance and never asked for anything in return. He looked out at the crowd and straight into her eyes. It's called the goodbye card. And he played. It wasn't perfect. His voice caught once. He missed a note in the bridge, but it was raw and beautiful and honest in a way that made the room go still. The lyrics told of a frozen night, a borrowed coat, a nurse with eyes full of tired fire, and a man who thought he'd been forgotten by the world, until someone remembered him. Annalie's hands trembled. She'd heard hundreds of songs in her life, but none that sounded like home. When it ended, the crowd erupted. But Jem didn't bow. He walked straight off the stage, straight to her. I went to Caleb's grave, he whispered. Told him everything. Told him I was sorry. Told him I met someone who made me want to live again. Annalie's lips parted, but no words came. Jem took her hand. I'm not leaving again. Not unless you tell me to. She squeezed his fingers and leaned her forehead against his. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. That night, they walked home together in the snow, hands intertwined. No more songs. No more coats. Just two people who found each other by accident, and chose not to let go. And on Annalie's fridge, under a magnet shaped like a heart, the white card still sat, unchanged, unread by the world, but holding a story that had rewritten both their lives. Part 4. Shadows from the Past. The days following the open MIC night buzzed with a strange energy, like the first warm breeze after a long winter. Jem and Annalie grew closer. Their nights filled with conversations that stretched into dawn, their mornings slower, more deliberate. It was as if the world had tilted slightly toward hope. But shadows have a way of creeping back in, especially when you least expect it. It started the morning Annalie arrived at the clinic to find a man waiting for her by the entrance, tall, in a sharp black coat, with eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. He looked out of place among the tired patients and busy nurses, and yet, when he caught sight of Annalie, a faint smile flickered on his lips. Ms. Annalie Kapoor. His voice was calm, steady. I need a word with you. Annalie's heart skipped. Can I help you? My name's Rajiv. I'm a friend of Jem's family. Jem's family. The words felt heavy, like a stone dropped in a calm pond. Rajiv handed her a thin envelope. He asked me to give this to you if he couldn't. Annalie's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph, Jem as a boy, standing beside a man who looked stern and unyielding, his arm draped protectively over Jem's shoulder. Behind them, a burnt-down house smoldered quietly in the background. The back of the photo was scribbled with one word, truth. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jem. Meet me at the park. We need to talk. At the park, the afternoon sun spilled gold over bare trees and frostbitten grass. Jem sat on a bench, fingers nervously tapping his guitar case beside him. He looked up as Annalie approached, his eyes weary. I wanted to tell you before Rajiv did, Jem began. My past isn't just a memory. It's a wound that's still open. Annalie sat beside him. I want to understand. He took a deep breath. Rajiv is my uncle, Caleb's older brother, but our family's complicated. Jem's voice faltered, eyes fixed on a distant point. Caleb and I weren't always close. After Mom died, Dad tried to hold us together but he drank too much. I ran away when I was 20 because I couldn't stand the fights, the silence, the way the house smelled like smoke and regret. Annalie reached out, placing her hand over his. Then the fire happened. Jem nodded slowly. Not an accident. The police said it was electrical, but I know better. Rajiv told me it was arson, someone who wanted to erase us. Caleb died trying to save our little sister. The house was gone, and so was our family. Annalie's breath hitched. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew, you'd leave. Annalie shook her head. You don't scare me, Jem. He smiled weakly but didn't meet her gaze. Rajiv says the person responsible is still out there. That they might come after me, or worse, after you. The cold tightened around them, the wind whispering threats they couldn't ignore. That night, as Annalie walked home alone, her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Stay away from him, or you'll be next. Her heart pounded. She immediately called Jem. He answered on the second ring, voice low. I got the same message. Fear wasn't new to Annalie, but this was different. It was personal. It was a warning. The next days were a blur of whispered phone calls, locked doors, and watching shadows that seemed to move just beyond her vision. Jem disappeared for hours, meeting Rajiv in secret, trying to piece together fragments of their shattered past. One evening, Jem came to her apartment, eyes wild. They are coming, he said. I have to face this, but I don't want you in danger. Annalie took his hands. We face it together. No more running. For the first time, Jem nodded, really nodded, and the weight between them felt a little lighter. They began digging into the past, police reports, old news clippings, whispered rumors. Each piece revealed a darker story, a family feud, debts owed to dangerous men, secrets traded in shadows. The deeper they went, the clearer it became. The fire wasn't just about Jem's family. It was about something bigger, something that could shatter everything they were building. One night, while sorting through dusty files at the community center, Annalie found a letter folded inside an old envelope, addressed to Jem. It was from Caleb. If you're reading this, I'm gone. But know this, family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to stand beside you. I'm sorry I couldn't be the brother you needed, but I'm proud of you. Don't let the fire burn out your light. Tears blurred Annalie's vision. She showed Jem the letter the next day. He took it gently, eyes shining. Caleb was braver than I ever was. They held each other close, knowing the fight ahead would test everything. Days later, Rajiv called them to an abandoned warehouse on the city's edge. There's one more piece, he said grimly. The man who did this, is closer than you think. Inside the warehouse, surrounded by broken crates and flickering lights, they found evidence, old photographs, documents, and a name, Dinesh Kapoor. Jem's father. The truth hit like a thunderclap. The man Jem had believed was his protector might have been his betrayer. Part 5. The final goodbye. The cold air bit at Annalie's skin as she and Jem stepped cautiously into the abandoned Kapoor family estate. A once grand house now rotting beneath years of neglect. The memories of happier days buried beneath peeling paint and shattered windows. Rajiv had uncovered enough to prove that Dinesh Kapoor was the mastermind behind the fire that destroyed their family and tore them apart. But why? And what was waiting for them inside? Jem's voice trembled as he pushed open the heavy front door. This place, it's like a ghost. Annalie squeezed his hand. Let's find the truth. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Their footsteps echoed through empty halls, the walls whispering secrets long hidden. They moved slowly, eyes scanning every corner. Then, in the study, Annalie found a locked drawer. Rajiv produced a key from his pocket, and with a click, the drawer opened to reveal a bundle of papers, yellowed with age. Jem unfolded a letter, his father's handwriting scrawled across the page. To my son, Jem, I never wanted you to know the truth. That I was forced into darkness to protect you all. Dinesh Kapoor's debts ran too deep. When he threatened your mother and sister, I made a choice, to cover up the fire as an accident, to save my family at any cost. Forgive me. Jem's breath caught. So my father was trapped too. Rajiv nodded. He wasn't a villain, Jem. Just a man broken by fear. Annalie felt tears sting her eyes. All this time, you've carried so much alone. Jem looked up, eyes fierce. But the past ends here. Suddenly, footsteps thundered from the hallway. A figure appeared, tall, shadowed, with cold eyes blazing. It's over, Jem, said Dinesh Kapoor, his voice low and cruel. You don't know what you're getting into. The confrontation was raw and brutal. Dinesh blamed Jem for destroying the Kapoor legacy, for revealing secrets that could topple powerful people. Jem stood firm, fueled by the love he'd found with Annalie and the strength of the family he chose. I'm not the same scared boy anymore. Rajiv lunged forward, and a struggle erupted, chaos swirling in the ruined house. In the end, the police arrived, tipped off by Rajiv earlier, and Dinesh was arrested, his reign of terror finally ended. Days later, Jem and Annalie sat in the quiet park, the sky painted with the soft hues of dusk. Jem smiled, his guitar resting beside him. I'm free now. Annalie leaned on his shoulder. And I'm not going anywhere. Their hands intertwined, the goodbye card finally making sense. A symbol of endings and new beginnings.